Hello and welcome back to the next part of my series, Ryan's Book Corner. Today, we're going to be going over the Almanack of Naval Ravikant. Naval is a super successful entrepreneur and is just, has a very transformative life story coming from a young boy in India, immigrating to the US, eventually getting into a pretty competitive high school, and that transforming his route from being, an immigrant son to now pursuing, STEM and eventually coding, and then leading to his involvement in startups and multiple exits in very well-known companies to now being, extremely wealthy and kind of writing books and trying to help other people as well. He has a very prominent Twitter account, and I'm going to share with you some of the big things that I learned from reading his book. So to be clear, his book is really just a collection of tweets and a documentation of a podcast, How to Get Rich by Naval Ravikant on YouTube that you can watch. And that's just all it is. So if you've listened to the podcast, it's actually very similar. There's a lot of overlap. But he also has a lot of tweets that are in there that he actually made on his account. And then they just kind of put them together because someone thought that it was so useful that it should be in a one book that you can just, absorb. Also, you don't have to buy the hard copy. If you actually search up the Almanack of Naval Ravikant, you can find a PDF for free. So you can actually read online if you want. So the biggest thing that he talks about a lot of things in this book. It's definitely one book that goes into so many different aspects of life, whether it be health, wellness, making money, happiness, just how to live a fulfilled life, what to do with family, all these things, right? How to balance everything. It just covers it all because in reality, it's just a bunch of tweets of his kind of thoughts and it's his explanation of those tweets. In the beginning, when he's talking about, more the entrepreneurial side of how to make money, how to become successful, he talks a lot about learning to build and sell. So learning to build is like being an engineer, and learning to sell is being a salesperson. And he says, if you can do those two things, which are very difficult, to have both of them, then you will be very successful. And he typically says it's easier to learn how to sell than it is to learn how to build. And what he means is that it's easier to be an engineer and have a very widespread knowledge of something and then learn how to market yourself, how to talk to other people, how to develop your soft skills, than going the other way around. And this is why typically a lot of salespeople don't have fundamental knowledge of certain things because they're just focused on being trained as salespeople first. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. He just says that to build very great companies, you need both in a sense, and it's rare to have both. A lot of people have one or the other, and it's very difficult to have both because it requires, a dual-sided kind of skill set. Next, he talks about, creating a lot of wealth. How do you do that? And you do that by using leverage. So this book is a form of leverage, and leverage is really just where you do something and it has an exponential possibility of return. In that he put in a limited amount of work and effort into maybe making this book or into maybe making a tweet. But because of the fact that the internet exists, it can now reach millions and millions of people without him having to physically go and, talk to millions and millions of people. Like one example he said is he could, instead of writing this book, give 1,000 talks, but those 1,000 talks are kind of limited unless they're recorded and put on YouTube and how many people can see them. And so with this book, it's a great way to spend a definite amount of effort for an exponential return. Now, of course, what he mentions later on, though, is that the problem that you have to realize with doing this is if you want exponential return, you have to expect there to be no return for a long time. In that if he wrote this book way before, he was known, nobody would want to read it because nobody knows what it is, nobody knows his credibility, all this stuff. And same thing with his Twitter page. I guarantee you early on, right, a lot of people were like, okay, who is this person, blah, 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 blah. But now he has millions of followers across different platforms and he's really well known. And that's because it takes a lot of time to hit that exponential side. And a lot of people just can't wait. And that's why typically people don't do this because it's also a risk. You could also go in the wrong direction. You could make a book that nobody wants to read, but then maybe the book after that you make that is actually useful and you finally hit the market for whatever you're trying to do. So that's the problem with these exponential things. This is very difficult to hit it. But the thing is, once you do hit it, and if you do hit it, it does have such a huge return compared to how much effort you put in, which is why he argues for high leverage things. Those include coding software, because of the fact that it can run kind of in your sleep in a sense with, you create it one time and it's used thousands and thousands of other times. And that's considered a high leverage opportunity. Same thing with, creating content, creating podcasts, YouTube, blogs, all this stuff can be consumed by many people without you having to do anything while they consume them, right? It's like you make a bulletin board of stuff and you just put it up there. And then once you're done, you just leave it there and people can see it. People can see it on their own time. That's really the point of what he's trying to say. One really key takeaway I had that he mentioned is that success will never happen on your time scale, but just give it more time and it will happen eventually. I think that I really resonated with this a lot because there's times when I specifically remember, I feel like now I'm much more content with where I am and understanding that this journey is going to take a long time. But there was a time when I was hyper fixated on success and hyper fixated on, making it and just all of this stuff and being like, I need it now. And the reality is it's just not going to happen now. The funny thing is in the digital world, everybody believes that everything moves so fast, but the underlying truth and fundamentals is that nothing moves fast. It's still the same as it was before. It's just we have different technologies, right? But it's the ultimate process of becoming successful still takes exorbitant amount of time. And you look at all the successful people and you see that. That's just repetitions, right? It's the successful people now versus the successful people, 20 years ago. It's pretty much the same process. They all start from somewhere. It all takes a while. It all sucks. And we just see the end product and we see them as an overnight success, when in reality, they've been doing the same thing for 10 years straight. And nobody considers that. And then nobody considers that on their own journey when they're like, oh, okay, when are my 10 years coming, right? Nobody thinks like that. They want to, next year. Or everybody thinks, I think, maximum in 2 to 3 years. So 2 to 3 years, I'll make it. And the reality is this is not how it works. So I think the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you can have more peace and just, focus on the journey. Here's a direct quote from him about happiness. The 3 big ones in life are wealth, health, and happiness. We pursue them in that order, but their importance is reverse. And I think that's a really big one. Now, to be honest, though, I think that he is at a point of privilege in that he makes a lot of these realizations about happiness after he achieves success. And I think that we can, say he's privileged and stuff, but that actually teaches us quite a bit. It teaches us that he also was chasing this idea of success for so long. And then once he reached it, he realized that people were still unhappy up there. Up there with all the money, they're still unhappy. Everybody around him was still unhappy. And he says the success conditions you to become this kind of super anxious person who's always stressed out about something. And he says what you have to do at that point, you have to learn how to be happy. And a lot of us just focus only on the success part and we don't learn about the happiness part. And again, that's totally fine because I completely understand I'm not successful yet either, right? But it's everybody just cares about just getting success first and then you worry about the other stuff later. But I would argue that there is a way to kind of do both, in that if you can be more grateful, be more content, and just understand that the process is going to take longer, you will have more relative happiness than the average person chasing success. Because the average person chasing success is going to be extremely miserable, just depressed all the time, right? They're always stressed out, all this stuff. And I think that's a normal part of the process, but I also think that adding a little bit more happiness in there is not something you can't do. It's something that's actually should be pretty easy to do, and it will increase your chances of just not burning out much more. Yeah. So I think my general takeaways from this book is it's a very good book to read if you have no idea where to start and you need a foundation book to tell you the key ways to think about money, success, and happiness, right? So it's a very bite-sized book in that there's not a lot of big chapters that are chunky or anything like that. He doesn't really talk about things in super, super detail, but he talks to them enough that you understand. And it teaches you what you need to learn to make money and what to prioritize. He talks about this thing called specific knowledge. Specific knowledge is stuff that is typically taught through apprenticeship. So it's something you couldn't necessarily read in a book, but it's if you followed somebody for, let's say 2 years, you could learn how they do things and then emulate that. And he says this is so important in the age of AI because a lot of automation stuff all comes down to more manual labor, more specific, more just skill set based tasks, just route skills, just do this, do that, etc. But he's these specific knowledge things are stuff you can't automate. And that's where it still provides protection in a sense of a job because the AI maybe won't be able to figure it out. Now, of course, that's all hypothetical. We don't know what's going to happen. But I think that's a good way to think about what kind of industries or areas you should be learning as you're trying to grow. Here's another direct quote from him. Happiness, love, and passion aren't things you find, they're choices you make. Another quote, a lot of our unhappiness comes from comparing things from the past to the present. Okay, so let me break down that first one, right? The truth is, you can choose to be happy, you can choose to love, and you can be passionate. it's a very hard choice because we all live with a lot of distractions in our life. We're all trying to be successful. We all have tons of problems. And we think that by becoming successful, the problems will go away. Yes and no. Some problems go away. Sometimes you get more problems. So if you think about like the number of problems, like 100, right? Let's say just every day you have 100 problems. The 100 problems probably stays the same, regardless of if you're, don't have money or you have money. The thing is just what kind of problems do you have? And so a lot of people think that when they get money, a lot of the problems will go away. No, all that really happens is you just change problems, right? So you have to realize that. Like, I think it's fine to want to become successful and want to have different problems. But the fact that you just change problems means that there is no end to the amount of problems you will have. And that's where the change he realized had to come from within. There's no external thing that can make you happy. You can make yourself happy. There are people in other countries, other than outside the US, who make much less than the US people do, but on average, they're much happier. And that just shows that it is not what's outside that matters, it's what's inside. So if you can take control of your mind and like your body and like all these things that you can control, you can have a happier existence regardless of whether or not you're successful. Of course, we want to become successful. Of course, we want to improve. But I'm just saying, try to take like at least 2% of this because it's going to make their journey so much better rather than you just constantly suffering. Okay. And then his next quote, a lot of our unhappiness comes from comparing things from the past to the present. I think another really great book you guys should read is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It's where this like guy just spends like a whole year doing nothing, just like existing on like park benches and stuff like that. But it's really important, I think, to make you realize as you're watching this video, the only thing you can control is the current moment. You can only control now. Whatever happened, me talking 5 minutes ago, I can't control any of that now. It's just past. Like, it's always a continual moving front of I only can make the decision now for this like moment, right? I can try to prepare for the future, but the future doesn't happen until it reaches the now, right? And reaches this moment when I make the decision and I make the next decision and I keep making decisions, right? So the reason I bring that up is that like what has happened in the past should only serve to teach you things, and it shouldn't serve to, be a constant reminder. To be honest, you really shouldn't be thinking about the past that much because you should extract the lessons, remember those lessons, and then just not worry about it because you can't control it at all, right? And what have we said in general? When you try to control things, if you don't have any control over something, you worry about it all the time. That's going to cause endless stress, endless worrying for no reason. Like if you're like, oh, I wish it rained today, but it didn't rain. Like you can't control that at all. And you stressing about it is causing unnecessary stress that's distracting you from what you actually need to be doing. Here's another one of his quotes. Enlightenment is the space between your thoughts. I thought this was really profound because he was talking about those moments when you're just like not thinking. And that a lot of times people think, oh, like I need to be a monk to be enlightened, all this. But in reality, it's like take some time to just like decompress. Not just because this is some like guru, some yoga thing, like decompressing can help your brain function better and help you make connections and help you just subconsciously like link things and help you just be more successful by like decompressing because you'll realize stuff without being in a super high stress environment. He's writing this thing and he said like, the reality is your greatest, most profound realizations are not going to come when you're like stressed out from like 80 different tasks, right? They're going to come from when you actually just sit down or walking, you're in the shower, you're just not really thinking about anything, and all of a sudden, like, boom, something pops in your head. You're like, oh, wow, that's actually like, something that I could use. So that's kind of why you want to have more of those aha moments. Another quote, happiness is being satisfied with what you have. Success comes from dissatisfaction. Choose. I think this is a really amazing quote because it just sums up the fact that like success and happiness seem to be polar opposites, but I think here's the reality. I think you can have an aspect of both. I think it just takes time, and you have to realize that you won't be the most happy you could be chasing success, but that's okay. But also have in mind an end goal for when you want to rebalance that. Notice that it's out of balance, and that's okay temporarily, but we don't want that to be the case even when you become successful. I think you need to set a deadline in your mind of when you actually become successful and like either define that, that could be retiring your parents or whatever, or just, making a stable income for yourself. Then realize you need to change the dialogue of happiness, what that means for yourself, and actually sit down and like physically try to rewire your brain a little bit to fix that. Because he says a lot of times we just are trained to become successful and just always dissatisfied, want the best. And it's like insanity. And it's true. It is insanity. Next up, he was talking about death and how death is the most important thing to acknowledge and embrace because it gives meaning to what you're doing. And it also makes you realize that not everything is so serious. I think this is the best part of the book that he has, because a lot of things can be traced back to death, in the sense that we're all going to die, and that should make you very grateful for every day you're alive. It should also make you realize that things are not that deep. If you messed up, it's not that deep. Just try again, try to keep getting better. Like, the emphasis should be on just keep going and trying and growing and learning and improving as much as possible. Think about like basketball players when they're shooting baskets, right? Like they can't just keep thinking about the times they missed every single time, right? They just got to keep trying and trying to improve their form, trying to do as much as they possibly can. You'll never see somebody as a basketball player who's just like, oh my gosh, I still remember those times I failed like every time, and you're just thinking about the right before you shoot. No, you can't do that, because you're not going to become successful, right? So you have to just like kind of not hold everything so tightly to yourself. Like, if you fail, like, yes, it sucks, it's terrible, you don't want to fail, but it happened, move on, grow from it, and try again and attack again. That should be the emphasis. But a lot of times people just sit in their failures, like time and time again, just don't do anything, and they just feel sad and feel bad for themselves. Yeah, another thing he talks about is just maintaining his health and happiness using diet and exercise. He talks about like eating whole foods. I think it's really common sense, but I mean, it's one thing to say, another thing to do, that's for sure. Exercise, he also said the biggest thing with exercise is working out, just doing some sort of physical activity. He doesn't say like gym is better than, playing basketball or running or whatever. He says just do the thing you're going to do, but just do it every day in the morning. And he said that has been the like biggest thing that has changed his life, because it just gave him so much more energy and more, just improved his life so much. Another really cool part of this book that he talked about was that the saying, I don't have time, is really another way for saying this is not my priority, or this is not a priority for me. And I think that's the biggest shift that you need to realize. It's not about time management, it's about priority management. Also, another part saying you're the sum of your habits. That's so true. And the problem is a lot of us have these like habits that have just accumulated over years and years of us not really paying attention and doing stuff. And that causes problems, because it's just like passively, you're just building these habits that are not necessarily good for you. And you need to kind of intentionally try to rewire them a bit. So that's a really important part. And then one of the last quotes I really like is, be impatient in taking action, but be patient with seeing results. You should do as much as you physically can, but you shouldn't be impatient in seeing results. I think that's something I definitely need to work on. I think I'm really good with the taking action part, but it's like I need to be more patient with seeing results. And the truth is, like, you become patient by being super impatient and then realizing that you're not seeing the results no matter what, and you just kind of let it go. And you just focus on the process, focus on doing the right thing, and just keep progressing forward. So yeah, those were my takeaways from the Almanack of Naval Ravikant. I super highly recommend it, because I think this is a really great book just for anybody at any stage, and you can typically just grasp some nugget from it. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. If not, make sure you subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video.